Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The death toll continues to rise as search and rescue teams scour quake-ravaged areas in both Turkey and Syria, desperately looking for survivors. Canada's premiers continue to mull over the federal government's latest offer of the Canada Health Transfer. And we hear about a brave young southern Alberta boy with a disability who has a robot to help make his life a little bit easier.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The death toll from Monday's devastating earthquake in Turkey and Syria has now risen to 17,000. Experts say tens of thousands more could die if another large quake hits the region, since most of the buildings are not earthquake-proof or resistant. While efforts have been made to modernize building codes and protect against tremors, researchers say there's a vast challenge getting older buildings safe enough to withstand an earthquake. Experts say Turkey lies on two major fault systems, the North and East Anatolian faults, making it one of the most vulnerable in the area that could be affected by a sizable earthquake. The 7.8 magnitude quake on Monday affected more than 23 million people in both Turkey and Syria. Residents in the Turkish city of Antakya who survived the earthquake waited for the loved ones to be rescued, with teams arriving to help days after the collapse of their apartments.
Annem, babam ve kardeşim enkaz altında, onları bekliyorum. Hiç ses yok günlerdir, hiç.
A newborn baby girl who was discovered under the rubble of a building in a northwestern Syrian town earlier this week is improving in hospital. She was found with her umbilical cord still connected to her mother. Sadly, her mother passed away. Hospital staff named the child Aya, and she's doing quite well. Urban search and rescue teams from Virginia and Los Angeles County arrived in Turkey to join in earthquake rescue and relief efforts.
DoD transported two civilian urban search and rescue teams from the United States to Turkey. U.S. Transportation Command supported this movement Tuesday via C-17 from Dover Air Force Base and March Air Force Base to Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. And those teams arrived on February 8th and will soon begin aiding the relief efforts there.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says a number of countries are now helping with search and rescue efforts, including Israel. She says the country put politics aside to help those who are in dire need right now.
The way that people are helping and all of the outpour of love and support from around the world, but especially from Israel, who's a neighbor and not an ally, right? So politics are being put aside, and perhaps this can put them into a new chapter politically in the way that Israel is helping. And I thank you, Hal, for bringing attention to this story, because often Israel, a small country the size of the state of New Jersey, is often putting its hat in the ring and sending humanitarian aid whenever there is some sort of natural disaster all throughout the world, and this being obviously no exception to that, especially since it is in their neighborhood and they're able to send help their way.
Lisa Daftari will also talk about why she was in Washington, D.C. recently addressing Congress. She'll have details coming up after Business News. While we've been enjoying some nice mild days across much of southwestern Alberta lately, Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, not only are we getting warmer temperatures, but also a little more daylight. It's no longer getting dark at 4:30 p.m.
That's right. Sunset now at 5:39 p.m. And I, for one, am very excited about it because I don't know about you. I just feel like it gives you so much more daytime left when you get home after work in the evenings. Speaking of the evenings, we are still going to be experiencing a bit of a windy one. We're looking at winds from the southwest at 40, gusting to 60 kilometers per hour with an overnight low of -2. And as we get closer to the weekend, Friday, we're looking at mainly sunny skies, high of 9 degrees. Still looking at those Chinook winds gusting from 50 to 70 kilometers per hour. So going to be a bit of a windy one. And then as we get into the weekend, things are just going to get even warmer. Could see some double digits in there, Hal. I'll be back later in the show to give you that update.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Alberta government announced that more than 1 million Albertans will soon be receiving their affordability payments. The first of 6 $100 payments representing $96 million in inflation relief is on the way. The funds will be sent to seniors, those with young small children, and a number of Albertans with disabilities. Government officials say in addition to these supports, the province is also providing additional support to food banks and other community groups. That includes increasing funding for low-income transit pass programs and indexed personal income tax. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith talked about a recent trip to Ottawa and meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Smith says she and her colleagues will be meeting soon to discuss Ottawa's new healthcare funding offer.
I think the Prime Minister made it pretty clear that it looked to me like that was his first and only offer. I'll be meeting with my First Minister colleagues, I think on Monday, to just see what our response will be. I know that there's a great amount of disappointment. They've been advocating on this issue for over 2.5 years. And so I think that they were anticipating that the new money would be a lot more. That being said, I think Alberta's share will be about $518 million new dollars. And I've already talked to my health minister about how he wants to deploy those dollars. We've already started on a very ambitious reform strategy, and it will be helpful. So we're going to be making sure we don't leave any money on the table.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford says he had a very productive meeting with 2 federal ministers on Ottawa's healthcare funding offer, but says there's still more work to do. The federal government is willing to add an extra $17 billion on top of the $196 billion 10-year offer to the provinces.
We have to consult with all the premiers right across the country, but it was a very positive meeting, and I'm very grateful for both ministers to come here in such short notice. But we all have the same objective, to make sure we deliver better health care right across this country.
It's an issue that all of us care about deeply. Premier Ford and the Government of Ontario in our federation have been and will always be leaders in these kinds of issues across the country. So Jean-Yves and I had a chance to talk with the Premier about the conversation we had with other First Ministers in Ottawa on Tuesday and how we can figure out the best way going forward.
A former public health officer from British Columbia was found guilty of abusing an Alberta child. Court of King's Bench found Dr. Albert de Villiers guilty of 1 count each of sexual interference and sexual assault. The court heard evidence that the doctor had sexually abused his friend's child when the boy was between 7 and 9 years of age. The incidents occurred between June of 2018 and July of 2020. De Villiers worked for 16 years as a medical officer of health for the AHS North Zone. In 2020, he moved to Kelowna to work as the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Interior Health. Members of the Fight for Pharmacare Alliance say lobbying efforts from the pharmaceutical and insurance industries to the federal government have quadrupled since the Liberal NDP coalition began in March of last year. The group also says Ottawa needs to introduce a national pharmacare plan as soon as possible.
In 2019, Dr. Eric Hoskins was commissioned to write a report about the implementation of a pharmacare plan nationwide. Now, it's up to all parties sitting in the House of Commons to implement that plan. It's sitting on the shelf collecting dust, and people are dying. Approximately 300 people annually die early because of lack of access to proper medications. Pharmacare, it saves money, and it saves lives too. It's really a win-win-win. It's a win for the federal government, creating a legacy for those who introduced it. It's a win for the provinces because it's been taken off their budget sheet. And most importantly, it's a win for the people of Canada.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says his party has introduced a new bill on bail reform which targets repeat violent offenders. Poilievre says Bill C-313 will make it more difficult for those who commit violent crimes, including firearms-related offences, to be released on bail. He says more needs to be done to protect Canadians.
The BC Union of Mayors wrote a letter in which they said that the same 40 offenders were arrested 6,000 times in 1 year in Vancouver. That's 150 arrests per offender per year. If you could just take those 40 violent offenders off the street, you'd have 6,000 fewer victims of violent crime. So we're not talking about massively increasing the number of people who are incarcerated. We're talking about targeting the most violent repeat offenders who've demonstrated through their habitual conduct a tendency to reoffend and a likelihood that they will do so.
You may have heard of the concept of a 15-minute city recently. Cities like Edmonton have looked into the possibility of implementing them. The idea originally began in Paris and other European cities. Now, we spoke to the president of the Lethbridge Historical Society, Belinda Croson, who explained exactly what a 15-minute city is and what it would potentially look like.
It's a theory that you should have all of your or most of your essential daily activities within 15-minute walk or bike ride if you want to. You could absolutely go in your car, you can go around the entire city, but you can find work, you can find school, you can find groceries, you can find all those things within your community. And it's the idea is called a complete community, so that you're not having to be reliant on cars if you choose not to be. And that's the theory that 15-minute cities are. And it's a theory. We see lots of different theories in planning, and this is one.
Theo Fleury, a former Calgary Flames hockey player and a 1989 Stanley Cup champion, has been very outspoken on social media against the idea of a 15-minute city. He recently called the concept anti-Canadian.
Under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, a 15-minute city is completely 100% illegal, according to that document. But what we've seen over the last 3 years is that document has basically been torn up, ripped apart. This rogue government that we have in Ottawa is basically doing whatever they can to gain full control of absolutely every single thing you put in your body, what you eat, how you travel, basically just life in general.
Bridge City News reached out to the City of Lethbridge to see if City Council has discussed the idea of implementing a 15-minute city. Staff with the city told us it's currently not on their radar. There have been a number of stories coming out of Calgary and Edmonton recently about thieves cutting out catalytic converters from vehicles. The thieves are allegedly targeting fleet vehicles. They're cut out and sold for a few $100s a piece. Now, a mechanic at Lethbridge Auto Repair Shop says the elements inside of a catalytic converter that helps to burn off unburnt fuel is what makes the piece of equipment so valuable. Owner of Carlson Automotive, Jamie Carlson, says fortunately he hasn't run into too many situations where people have had theirs stolen here in the Windy City, but the cost to replace a cat can be quite costly.
To put a new catalytic converter in, a lot of them, run anywhere from $500, probably up to $2,000 or $3,000, depending on the vehicle, in order to repair this after they've stole the catalytic converter. Even used ones run probably about $200 a person can get for them to start, and they probably run up to $500 to $1,000, so that they can actually get for cash for those catalytic converters. So.
Bridge City News did reach out to the Lethbridge Police Service on how many stolen catalytic converters incidents have been reported to them, and thankfully, not many cases have been reported so far here in Lethbridge. A young boy from Bow Island, Alberta, who suffers from a genetic condition which inhibits his ability to eat independently, is pushing the limits thanks to a new robotic device. As Angela Stewart explains now, this robot could be the first of its kind in Canada.
Machine's tricky.
Ever since he was born, he's had to rely on the help of his parents because of a debilitating and rare joint condition.
It's kind of hard to do stuff myself.
Completing routine tasks like eating is a challenge for this little 9-year-old boy, simply because his range of motion is severely affected. But now, Reed Hintz is defying all the odds thanks to a new revolutionary piece of equipment.
It's very cool for me because no one has to feed me. I can do it myself.
It's called Obi, a robotic feeding device controlled with just the touch of a button, and it comes with a hefty price tag. It also could be the first of its kind for Canada.
This unit is $10,000, just a little bit over $10,000 Canadian, and that is quite an expensive endeavor. However, the technology in it definitely makes it show its value.
It all started in 2019 when the young boy was featured in an Adapt mobility commercial. Community members learned about Reed and his story and didn't hesitate for a second to help him.
So they contributed some money towards the start of paying for the Obi.
The new dining device now gives Reed just a little bit more independence, something his mom says they will forever be grateful for.
I think it's an amazing that we live in this community in which there's still good people that, without even personally knowing Reed, donated a miracle device. It was something that would have took us a long time to save for, to provide for him. He gets to be one of the kids. He doesn't have to focus on his disabilities.
It means a lot to me that I can eat and then Mom and Dad don't have to be there all the time.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
What a beautiful story. 2 Lethbridge Collegiate Institute football players are ready to kick off their new careers with a couple of universities from Regina and Toronto. The school held a signing for the soon-to-be post-secondary players. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, the coach for the high school football team says he's very proud of how each player got to this point.
To have 2 of our guys this year, Connor and Jake, move on to play post-secondary ball kind of shows that we're moving in the direction that we want to as a program, and hopefully we continue doing that.
Connor Broad and Jake Jurasic are ready to hit the road and start fresh with York University and the University of Regina. The head coach of athletics at LCI, Pat Leahy, says the two players had a huge impact on the football team. He also mentioned that Lethbridge has a long history of churning out players that have seen great success in major football leagues and divisions across North America.
The history of Lethbridge putting out really solid CFL players, guys like Brad Ardos from CCH, obviously the Got Boys from LCI. We've got two kids from LCI playing Division I football right now in the States.
It clicked right away for Broad that he would be heading to York University to study criminology. He explained exactly what stood out to him during his time with LCI and the football team.
I've only played football for 2-3 years now, and getting to know Coach Leahy as well as Coach Dave Lowry, which they were both big impacts in my life, and they kind of introduced me to the sport as well as a few of the different teammates that I had.
Jurasic said he is hoping to get into the sciences and receive a chemistry degree at the University of Regina. Once that's completed, he told us he'll be looking to get into pharmacy school. He reflected on his football journey at LCI and how important it was in building up his confidence.
Being an out-of-town player, I was definitely nervous coming in, but I definitely felt like the coaching staff, players adopted me well, had a great time, and loved it here.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Congratulations going out to both players. That's great news. You know, with Valentine's Day just around the corner, what better time to talk about marriage and really what makes it work? Dr. Daniel Sapula is a pastor at Miss City Church here in Lethbridge and author of The All for Nothing Marriage. He says most people think marriage is kind of a 50-50 contract, but he says for him, it's a 100 to none principle.
What happens if your spouse is ill? They become incapacitated. Like how do you do 50-50? And then they say, I never thought about that. And then it occurs to them that, wow, we cannot operate on a 50% proposition. I believe the divorce rate in our country, the problem we encounter in marriage in our country is because we have based it on the 50-50 proposition. And I suggest that marriage is not a 50-50 proposition. It's 100% to none.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Dr. Daniel Zapula and BCN's Jeanette Roche coming up in the second half of our show. Well, it was another beautiful day for a barbecue here in Lethbridge, and the mild temperatures will be sticking around for the rest of the week. A complete look at the weather picture is on deck. I've been seeing more and more people riding their bikes in the city once again, and you know why not with the warmer temperatures we've been experiencing? Jeanette Roche is in now with a full look at the weather picture. Jeanette, there's also the potential that we may see double-digit plus temperatures later this week. Will we get close to breaking any records?
Yeah, well, we certainly are looking at a double-digit day on a Sunday with a high of 10 degrees. As for breaking records, though, looks like we would have to be a little bit closer to the 14-degree mark to do that. But, you know, weather is strange, especially in these parts, and anything can change. So we'll have to just keep our eye on that. But we are looking at a high of 9 degrees on Friday with mainly sunny skies. Clear skies also expected on Saturday. 6 degrees the high there, and there's that double-digit day. Sunday, that high of 10 degrees with clear skies. Monday, also seeing lovely sunny skies, 8 degrees the high. And now, okay, so Tuesday, that is Valentine's Day, and look what's happening. We're getting this weird little cold snap. So we're looking at a 60% chance of flurries that day, coupled with quite a bit colder weather. We're looking at a high of only -2, so it's almost like St. Valentine is sending us that cold weather so that we all snuggle up to each other or something. I don't know what's going on. And then on Wednesday, we're back up to the pluses again with a mix of sun and cloud, high of 2 degrees that day. So the average high for this time of year is 1 degree, average low -11. 16 was our high temperature on this day back in 1987. That was a record. And the record low was -42, and that happened back in 1939. 7:52, that's when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this evening at 5:39 p.m., giving us 9 hours and 47 minutes of daylight. We are getting very close to that 10-hour mark. Pretty exciting. Okay, so in Victoria tomorrow, looking at a high of 10 degrees. Victoria also seeing some showers and some 40K winds in that Harrow Strait. 10 degrees the high also in Vancouver tomorrow with some showers, but look what's happening. There's a risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow, and that could be mixed with some hail as well, so be on the lookout for that. 6 degrees the high in both Edmonton and Calgary tomorrow with clear skies, 30 to 50K winds for both of those cities, and of course with the wind chill back wind chill factor rather, it could make those values feel much colder than they are. 3 degrees expected to be the high in Saskatoon tomorrow, a high of 1 expected in Regina with clear skies in both of those Saskatchewan cities. Winnipeg with partly cloudy skies coming in at a high of -5, and same thing with the wind chill, it is going to feel a little bit chillier. Okay, so as we get to the central part of the country, are looking at quite a bit of precipitation. Toronto seeing showers mixed with some flurries, high of 4 degrees there. Same thing for Ottawa. Ottawa seeing flurries mixed with showers, high of 3. Also the expected high tomorrow in Montreal. Montreal also seeing some showers. Now, remember when I mentioned that Atlantic Canada could be seeing some mixed precipitation by Friday? Well, here it is. Okay, Fredericton, we're looking at 2 centimeters of snowfall mixed with some ice pellets, risk of freezing rain. 1 degree the high, 10 degrees the high in Halifax. Halifax has quite a bit going on here. Snowfall looking at 2 centimeters mixed with those ice pellets. By the afternoon, we're looking at showers, 5 to 10 millimeters of showers. Charlottetown, high of 3 degrees, but heavy snowfall, looking at 10 centimeters of snowfall mixed with ice pellets. Also risk of freezing rain, blowing snow in exposed areas, so lots going on there. St. John's, Newfoundland, not too bad. Partly cloudy skies and -6. There you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
TELUS says its fourth quarter net income attributable to common shares plunged to $248 million. That compares with a net income of $644 million a year earlier. The Vancouver-based company says it earned 23 cents per share on an adjusted basis. That is below the 28 cents analysts were expecting. Operating revenue and other revenue for the quarter increased from $4.9 to $5.1 billion in the last 3 months of 2021. In its outlook for the year, TELUS says it expects operating revenue to grow between 11 and 14%. Saskatchewan-based uranium miner Cameco is reporting a fourth quarter loss of $15 million. That compares with a profit of $11 million in the same quarter a year earlier. It says, however, it earned 9 cents per share on an adjusted basis, beating analyst expectations of 6 cents. Revenue for the quarter also increased from $465 to $524 million. The company's CEO, Tim Getzel, says demand for nuclear power is driving the best fundamentals the company has ever seen for the nuclear fuel market. A new report says putting public funds into carbon capture and storage projects is far too risky. The study by the International Institute for Sustainable Development says carbon capture technology is far too expensive and takes too long to build. It says Canada's oil and gas industry needs to reduce emissions now in order to meet its 2030 climate goals. The report says instead of subsidizing carbon capture projects, public money should go toward energy efficiency and electrification. There are just 7 operating carbon capture and storage projects in Canada, with several more being proposed. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 81 points on the day to finish at 20,597. The Dow was down 249 points to 33,699. The S&P 500 was down 36 on the day to 4,081. And the Nasdaq was down 120 points to 11,789. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 81 cents to 77.66 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to 2.46 US. Gold was down 13.71 to 18.6178 US an ounce, and silver was down 34 cents to 21.98 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.87 per bushel. Barley's at $9.04, canola's at $18.40, and corn is at $11.18 per bushel. Live cattle were up 3 cents to $160.83. Feeder cattle March contract was up 38 cents to $186.83, and lean hogs were down 10 cents to $75.83. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.32 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says his party has introduced a new bill on bail reform which targets repeat violent offenders. Poilievre says Bill C-313 will make it much more difficult for those who commit violent crimes, including firearms-related offenses, to be released on bail. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, just returned home after being called to Washington, D.C. to speak with Congress about the Iran Revolution taking place. She has an update for us momentarily. If you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Lethbridge City Council wants to hear from you. The city is exploring the option of harmonizing speed limits in both playground and school zones. During this process, community feedback is being collected to help inform City Council's decision. Lethbridge residents are encouraged to learn more about this proposal and provide their feedback through an online survey which will be open until February 19th. You can find the survey at getinvolvedlethbridge.ca/harmonized playground zones. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
Normally, we interview our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari on Mondays, but Lisa was unavailable earlier this week because she was flown out to Washington, D.C. to address Congress on the Iran Revolution taking place there. Lisa's back in Los Angeles and has details of her trip. So, Lisa, what specific information was Congress seeking from you?
I think, Congress is well aware of what's going on. The people's movement inside Iran. It's just that they're battling a Biden administration that has not wanted to get involved more directly with supporting regime change or supporting any further the movements inside Iran. So what we have gotten from the Biden administration up till now is a little bit of distancing themselves from the JCPOA, which is the Iran nuclear deal. If you remember, that was the deal that was signed between President Obama and the 5 world powers and the Iran regime back in 2015. President Trump came in May of 2018, and just as he said he would, he ripped up the deal and said the United States is pulling out. So Biden campaigned on getting right back into the deal. And again, we're not even talking about Iran's, the regime's behavior. We're not talking about the billions of dollars that they pour into terrorism. We're not talking about how they have, awful, brutal human rights violations. We're not talking about how they have American, Canadian, European blood on their hands, but we just talk about getting into the deal and getting out of the deal like a ping pong match between different partisan administrations. So now you have the Biden administration who has been trying so very hard to get back into the Iran nuclear deal, and it just hasn't worked. And that is mainly because the Iran regime has asked for too much. So now, just to catch everyone up, over the last 5 months, we've had Iranians on the streets in Iran getting their eyes poked out, getting killed, getting shot at point blank just for supporting these peaceful protests. 18,000 young people are currently in prison because of their protesting, and many have been executed. Many celebrities, influencers, rappers, musicians, dancers have been rounded up as a symbolic measure to say you shouldn't support the people's movement. So I was there in Washington doing a briefing on really the inside. What are the people of Iran saying? How is this movement different than other movements? Why is this the Iranian people's best chance in 44 years? This government came into power 44 years ago when the Shah of Iran, the king, was toppled and this Islamic regime came in. I talked about why this is the best chance they've ever had, why the people of Iran are braver than ever, and they want the Western world's help in getting this done. And the people of Iran, they have one clear message for Washington and anyone else who's willing to help them. It's, please, we want your help, but if you're not going to help us, at least don't stand in the way. Don't take the sanctions off the Iran regime. Don't let them off the hook. And please help us to get to our goal, which is ultimately regime change and to establish a democratic, free society.
Lisa, the death toll in Turkey and Syria has now reached over 11,000, well over 11,000 following Monday's devastating earthquake in the region. Israeli Defense Forces have sent, 15 cargo planes and set up a field hospital in Turkey as rescue efforts continue.
Yeah, this is, I mean, there are it's horrific, right? And I think the death toll, since I checked, was a little higher than that even. So it's steadily climbing. It's hard to even get a grasp for what the death toll is, but it's obviously it's going to be in the tens of thousands. And that's just, it's horrific to think that all those people could not get out. The stories of babies, or the one baby, I don't know if you got a chance to see, the umbilical cord was still attached to the mother who died, and the baby was able to be saved. I mean, you think about this child's future and the first moments of life for this child, and it's just horrific. But then you also have these, these feel good stories that come out of there, the way that people are helping, and all the outpour of love and support from around the world, but especially from Israel, who's a neighbor and not an ally, right? So politics are being put aside, and perhaps this can put them into a new chapter politically in the way that Israel is helping. And I thank you, Hal, for bringing attention to this story, because often Israel, a small country the size of the state of New Jersey, is often putting its hat in the ring and sending humanitarian aid whenever there is some sort of natural disaster all throughout the world. And this being obviously no exception to that, especially since it is in their neighborhood and they're able to send help their way.
Lisa, let's circle back to Iran for just a moment here. It appears as though the Iranian military is trying to flex its muscles just a little bit as 2 Iranian naval ships are reportedly sailing toward the Panama Canal. Is the Islamic Republic trying to project its power into the Americas?
Yes, and they have been doing for a long time. I was able to catch up with a friend of mine who's an expert in Latin American affairs and national security, and he's been following this, and I actually have interviewed him several times. So we've had our finger on this issue for a while now, and that is the growth of the presence of Iran's proxies in Latin America for over a decade right now. And we're looking at places mostly Venezuela, Brazil, Bolivia. We're looking at Nicaragua. We're looking at places where they have either been able to infiltrate, or that the government lends itself to infiltration. So in the case of Venezuela, it's a no-brainer, right? There are direct flights between Caracas and Tehran already. There are relationships there. You see so many Hezbollah operatives on the ground there. You see them opening up cultural centers. You see them having an influence on the ground. You also see Syrian operatives there, both in Syria and in Venezuela. You see, flip-flopping of nationals living in both places. So there is a reciprocity already. And look, the continent is really up for grabs, Hal. So they're thinking to themselves, why not be at the footstep of the Americas? Why not have, be closer to our sworn enemy and have access there? So, think about the endless scenarios where they can get in from our southern border, which is extremely vulnerable and porous. They can easily launch a bomb from Latin America into the United States. So it's something that the Biden administration and many administrations before him have been sleeping on, not paying too much attention to it. There were a few of these investigations that were actually canceled by the Obama administration looking into Hezbollah in Latin America. And again, it points to the fact that the Obama administration, and now it's 2.0, the Biden administration, have such an affinity for Iran's regime that they kind of wanted to look the other way when it comes to its dirty work, whether it's in Iran, in the Middle East, or in Latin America. So yes, Iran has been taking advantage of its partners in Latin America. It's moving its ships towards the Panama Canal like it promised it would. And of course, Brazil, that recently had an election, a very liberal candidate there, an old friend of the Iran regime, and they have obviously rekindled that relationship, and they will get a lot of help from Brazil as well because of that.
Let's talk about that recent image that was seen on Twitter here of an apparent Iranian missile with the words "Death to Israel" written in Hebrew, seen at an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps display in Iran. It's gone viral.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at this. What an image, right? So you don't need any words there. Look, they're trying to flex their muscles and send a message to the United States and to Israel and really to the free world to say, we don't care how many sanctions you put on us. We don't care if there's no JCPOA, no nuclear deal. We don't care about the people that are marching out onto the streets, but we still are continuing forward with our programming. And that's exactly it. They will continue on with enrichment of uranium. They will continue funding terror where they have the funds. I mean, we hope that the sanctions have been doing their share of putting a dent in their economy so that they are not able to have that kind of liquid assets. But this is them putting on a show. This is exactly what this regime has always done. For 44 years, they have flexed their muscles. They have tried to isolate themselves from the Western world by creating these enemies. And at home, even though there are 80 million people out onto the streets, a certain small segment of the population does rally around the flag when they do see things like this, sworn enemies of the United States and Israel. But I will tell you how many of my interviews on the ground, they have repeated several times that the last 5 months, the protests, the people of Iran have really had an awakening, and they understand that this is propaganda talk. And there's so many chants that say America is not the enemy is right here, it's our government. And they understand that this is all propaganda talk, whether it's about Israel being the enemy or the United States being the enemy.
Yeah, many believe the changes need to be made right now, or even yesterday already. Lisa, it appears as though China wants the United States to return debris from the alleged spy balloon that was shot down. That's according to China's ambassador to France. He says, listen, this is Chinese property, we want it back, and if the Americans don't want to return it, it really demonstrates their dishonesty.
How do you say chutzpah in Chinese, Tal? There are no words. I mean, think about this scenario. I mean, it doesn't really even need to be painted out, but I will go ahead and unpack this a bit. Think about them putting these surveillance balloons. I mean, at the Foreign Desk, we're working on a story today that actually we have now experts that are telling us these balloons were able to gather intelligence, even though I know a lot of people are dismissing this and saying, they want to, in the words of Daryl Issa that I was able to interview over while I was in DC, he says they wanted to measure before they cut, which is a good way of putting this. They were kind of testing the United States to see what their resolve would be, how quickly they would act. They did not act too quickly, right? So instead of shooting it down over the Pacific, we got it over the Atlantic. And why wait all this time? Why all the deliberation? So in that case, the United States failed that. But imagine on the part of the Chinese to say, we're testing you at best case scenario, we're testing you. What worst case scenario, this was espionage, right? And we were spying on you. And now you got to give it back because you're the one who's being dishonest. And guess what? With the Biden administration, they can say whatever they want and get away with it. So Xi Jinping and Biden had a meeting just a couple of months ago. For 3 hours, they talked, and none of this was brought up. None of the provocations, none of the surveillance, none of the copycat technology, none of their spies being in our labs, in our schools, in our universities, in our places of governing, from local all the way up to federal. We know that they are there. None of this was brought up. So they will continue pushing and pushing because they can.
Lisa, American forces are returning to the Philippines to counter alleged Chinese threats. The longtime allies announced that American forces would be granted access to 4 more Philippine military camps, aside from the 5 other local bases?
Yeah, so they're trying to beef up their presence in the region, and of course, as a result of China moving forward, and it looks like China will invade Taiwan. So we're trying to prepare for that day. Again, referring back to the meeting between Xi Jinping and Biden, the only takeaway from the White House notes was that Biden is confident that China will not invade Taiwan. Well, guess what? It looks like the actions that the military is taking speak a very different message. And that message is that we know they're going to do it. We're just wondering when it will happen. So obviously, we're seeing a lot of this. We're trying to be in the region, trying to have a presence there and to counter whatever Chinese threat there is over there before it gets too late.
Now, still with China, a new survey says TikTok is the most popular app for young North Americans right now, ahead of YouTube. How concerned should we be about this?
It's very concerning because there is kind of like this reverse graph here with the popularity of TikTok skyrocketing here in the United States, and obviously a lot of lawmakers trying to ban TikTok in the same breath. So they understand the threat that TikTok is presenting, obviously owned by Chinese, and able to gather a lot of information. Now in Washington, they are going to be questioning a lot of experts on this to see to what extent China can gather information from this app in order to see if this ban will be only based on certain states, because now Texas is going forward. I know New Jersey actually applied this ban to its government workers. They're not able to access it on their phones. So, it's crazy to think that it's become so popular among the youth, but then they're using this obviously to spy on us as well. So I don't know if the young people are going to be out on the streets protesting if this app is in fact banned because they rely on it so much. But these are the facts, and then I think the government should be much more transparent about what the threat really is.
Now we have some good news for Conservatives. Republican GOP leaders and committee members on armed services vowed that they are looking at ways to slash woke spending from the defense budget and strengthen the military. Lisa, what exactly does woke spending look like?
If you've been following some of these stories that are coming out of the military, where people are getting suspended or punished in some capacity if they don't use the right pronouns, if they don't ask people's pronouns, a certain level of education for woke culture and pronouns and such. This is the military. I mean, and if you look at just everything across the board, you look at what fifth graders in China are learning calculus, and our fifth graders here are learning about exactly this: pronouns, and you can be a girl and be a boy, you could be a boy and be a girl, et cetera, et cetera. And this kind of this ridiculousness has been following us into very serious sectors, and that is obviously with the military. We have government workers that are very concerned about this. But the military should be concerned with one thing, and that's defense, and that's keeping our borders, our nation, our assets safe, and that's been lost. So this is an attempt to publicly say we're cutting that funding, meaning we're not going to put any sort of curriculum or education or focus on those types of concerns, and to move forward with what is important.
Political reporter and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us again from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
Well, Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and romantic love is indeed a wonderful thing. However, it seems to have this inevitable tendency to fade over time. So how can we keep the spark alive in our marriage? We're joined today by Dr. Daniel Zabula, pastor of Midst City Church in Lethbridge and founder of the Bridges of Hope humanitarian organization, and the author of The All for Nothing Marriage: Why Your Marriage Will Kill You Before Death Do You Part. Yes, that is the title. Welcome to BCN, Daniel. Great to have you on again.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting.
Okay, so I love the title of your book. It's very interesting and long. Can you maybe give me a brief explanation of how you came up with it?
Well, the all for nothing, this why your marriage will kill you before death do you part, is based on an idea called primary love. And that is the fact that there's three kinds of love. But primary love is the act of giving yourself to somebody unconditionally. It's a dying to yourself and embracing the self of somebody else and creating a new person. And in that, it's not about me. It's like as Christ did, he died for the church that he loves, so too we die for the home and the marriage that we love. And that is why I said marriage will kill you before death do you part, because you will die to self and you are yielding to God in Christ in your spouse.
Interesting. So these days, there are a lot of different opinions on what marriage is all about, but you're a pastor, of course. So can you give us a working definition of biblical marriage?
Yeah, I think that indeed there's so many definitions of marriage out there. But for me, I found that the most helpful one is to think of marriage as a sacred place. The sense that your life is sacred, my life is sacred. And being together, we create a place, a space that is sacred. And sacred spaces mean that even God, the divine, invade that place. It's a place that is safe and sacred, apart from all other. And not only that, it's a blame-free zone where our commitment is not to be in the blaming zone because it's very easy to blame. There's no blame. And it's a place that is sacred and safe where you can give yourself completely and unconditionally to another person in the presence of God.
I like that. When people first get married, there's a lot of fire and passion, right? But is it unrealistic to expect that to continue at the same level years down the road?
Yeah, that's a great question because sometimes I think it has been helpful for many people to think about three kind of loves. One, they call it eros, which is a love in between lovers, and then they talk about philia as companionship and general friendship. But they think about agape as the giving of yourself away freely and unconditionally, irrespective of the person, whether the person deserves it or not. Problem is today in today's society, I will love you when you love me. It's conditioned. And in the all for nothing marriage, we are recommending that the kind of love that is closer to a biblical definition of marriage and love is unconditional surrender and gift of self. Unconditional. And it's a gift because I give myself freely. I think consciously, not because I cannot, but I offer myself. And I say to my wife, here I am, have me, I'm here for you. There is no condition attached to my gift. Because we believe that anytime you attach any condition to your gift, it's not love. It's a giving of yourself, not agape love. Agape love, you give fully, no condition attached to it.
I would imagine you've learned a lot of these lessons over time as you've been married. You probably didn't come into marriage knowing all of this, or did you?
No, I didn't know anything. I didn't have a clue. That's why my marriage killed me. Because I came in this marriage with a sense of compatibility. You got to find the right mate. You got to find the right wife or the right husband. And everybody in our churches, and we want to seek the right partner. We don't want to make a mistake. And they give us the character, the competency. That person needs to have a high character, high moral. They need to be competency. They need to be, they have to be compatibility, which is a myth. I got married and I realized, well, I am in a multiracial, multicultural kind of marriage, and I realized, wow, the fact that I'm from Africa and my wife is from here is not really what determined the quality, whether it is the quality and the quantity and our experience of marriage. It was the person I brought. And I realized in order to go forward into our destiny as one, I needed to die to myself. And that is why I began to really explore what the Bible have to say about marriage, what the Bible have to say about love. And it profoundly transformed me in my marriage. And I believe that understanding alone can change and profoundly transform the way we do life. And if we have time, I can tell you a story from the Bible about why this have become important to us.
Oh, yeah.
It's Genesis 29. It's a story about a man named Jacob. It's interesting that the name Jacob means deceiver. And Jacob had deceived his brother Esau, and he's running away to hide. And as he's running, he decided to go to Laban, his uncle. And he goes there, he has an encounter with God. And then he ended up in his uncle's house. And he fell in love with Rachel. Love. And the Bible describes Rachel, again, in that literature as curved in all sides, in all the right place. She was beautiful. She was wonderful. She was, wow, every eyebrow was raised around her. So he told his uncle, I want to marry her. Give me Rachel for my wife. He fell in love deeply. And then his uncle said, no problem. You worked for me 7 years, and I'm going to give you Rachel. If you remember the story, he worked so hard, and the Bible said 7 years seemed to be like 7 days. And on the day of the wedding, something happened. After the feast, the celebration, he goes to bed. His wife is brought to him. So he goes to bed, he made love to her. And Bible said when he wake up in the morning, he looked and it was not Rachel. It was Leah. It was Leah,
It was the sister.
Rachel's older sister.
Yeah.
And Jacob is shocked. And he goes to his uncle. He said, why have you Jacobed me? Why have you deceived me? I work for Rachel. Why did you give me Leah? And then his uncle said, well, because she's older. That's our custom. And here's what he did. He said, if you finish your honeymoon with Leah, I'm going to give you Rachel too. It's a bizarre story. So he finished his honeymoon with Leah, and then he's given Rachel for 7 more years. He worked and worked for 7 more years. But here's the point that the story is trying to tell. And so the story is this. Even Jacob was in love with Rachel, but in order to get the woman of his love, he needed to embrace the woman of his fate. Now, here it is. In order to get to Rachel, you need to marry Leah. And the point being made is that every choice that we make, we need to live with its unintended consequences, right? If you choose Rachel, you will have to marry Leah. And I think for many of us in marriage, we have really got our Rachel. Our problem is that we never seem to be at peace with Leah, which is the unintended consequences of our choice and decision. And if you read the Bible, interesting enough, it is Leah that will end up being the great-great-grandmother of Jesus Christ.
Right. You know, it's so interesting. I want to get back to your book for a second here, because in your book, you do say that the key to a phenomenal marriage is something called primary love, right? So you can maybe tell us about that a little bit, and also when the romantic sparks have faded and marriage becomes mundane or worse, sometimes you'll hear people say, you know, we just weren't that compatible. So what's your response to that specifically?
Yes, and that's what I mean, like in the story. Primary love is that giving away of yourself to somebody. You know, it's that surrendering. It's a dying to yourself and giving yourself away to somebody, irrespective of the fact whether they deserve it or not. You see, we have this culture in which we know, yeah, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. In primary love, I'll scratch your back even if you don't scratch mine. You know, no greater love has there been that a man should die and give his life and surrender it for his own. And in primary love, I am really trying to explain how in marriage, in Christian understanding of marriage, we need to die to self and to embrace the mystery and the sacred space, the sacred place that somebody else is, embracing them unconditionally. I talk about compatibility and the sense that really we tend to say, well, it's a Christian teaching. You need to get married. You need to pick somebody. There's only one person that God has for you there, and that person need to be compatible to you. That means you need to have the same thinking, same feelings, same preferences. But in my book, I defend that actually compatibility is a myth, because what you like, what I like, it changes over time.
I was just going to say that. You might find somebody that's compatible with you today, but like 15 years from now, I mean, it's possible. People change. People change all the time.
And that's right. And that's why the compatibility myth is a myth. It's a sense of, but the only thing that doesn't change, it's my unconditional love, my unconditional giving of myself to my spouse, whether it is cold or hot, whether everything feels good or terrible. My gift is unconditional.
Mm-hmm.
Let's think about it for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when it comes to compatibility or lack of compatibility, I think that we all tend to point the fingers, you know, when things aren't going smoothly, or to place blame on the spouse. So you write about the 100 to none principle. What is that?
Yeah, because and again, just to finish about the compatibility, it is, again, when people blame compatibility for problem in their marriage, it's a myth. marriage, I've seen most marriages have one problem. They have a connection problem, not a compatibility problem. When I don't connect to somebody, when you're not connected to somebody, everything else falls apart. Your connection is what makes a marriage. That is very, very important. I want your listener to just have that kind of understanding. When connection is there, we have an incredible marriage. The 100% to none is this. It's based on this principle. When people get married, I meet them for premarital counseling. And one of the things that I ask them, I say, marriage is a 50-50% proposition. You give 50%, I give 50%. And I say, wow, it's not neat. So now, when your wife gets pregnant, what is 50%? What does that mean? And people say, wow, I never thought about that. Well, I say, what happens if your spouse is ill? They become incapacitated. Like, how do you do 50-50? And then they say, I never thought about that. And then it occurs to them that, wow, we cannot operate on a 50% proposition. I believe the divorce rate in our country, the problem we encounter in marriage in our country is because we have based it on the 50-50 proposition. And I suggest that marriage is not a 50-50 proposition. It's 100% to none. I give you 100%. I give you all that I am. You get to choose to give. But my love to you, my being here, is a gift to you unconditional. Now that's a whole different way of thinking. And that means I don't expect anything. I receive what you give, but I can control my gift. I give myself without condition.
I like that. I like that. And it's a perfect message for Valentine's Day to you. Thanks so much, Daniel, for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm really, really looking forward to an incredible Valentine's season. I hope you have a great one with your own love, your lovers, your partner, and God bless you.
You too. Thank you. Dr. Daniel Zopula is the author of The All for Nothing Marriage. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.